Welcome to The Top Out, the show where we talk with entrepreneurs and investors about how they got started, the companies they run, and how they see the future. Brought to you by Redpoint Solutions. David Taus is the executive director of Big City Mountaineers, a national nonprofit focused on increasing youth access to the outdoors. Hey, David, thanks for joining us today. How's it going?
It's good. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Hey, so there's a bunch of things I want to go over with you. I'd like to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into the role that you're in now with Big City, and then dive a little bit into what Big City does and kind of like the mission behind the organization and where you see it going in the future. But can we start with just some background? Like, how'd you get into this whole thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this role and this organization specifically is kind of the culmination of like everything I've done in my career and everything I care about. So Big City Mountaineers is a national nonprofit, and we help youth from disinvested communities get outside and do hiking, camping, backpacking, paddling trips when they might not have the opportunity to do that. So it's something that I'm really passionate about and think that everyone really benefits from something like this. And it's especially hard when the people who stand to benefit from the most don't have the opportunity to do it. So it feels really good to be able to provide that for people. But how I got started was I was a YMCA camp counselor when I was in college. And I went to this YMCA camp in Wisconsin, and it really changed my life. It showed me kind of what it meant to spend time outdoors and in nature in a very different way. It put me in touch with people who weren't like the people I grew up around. And it did it in a way that like really shaped who I was. So that became a lifelong journey. And most of that journey up until I came to BCM was in education and youth development work and nonprofits. So I spent a long time as a high school teacher. I co-founded a nonprofit that helped to give tutoring to kids who couldn't afford it, and helped people enter the teaching profession and worked with school districts and things like that. And that whole time I thought to myself, like human beings are having a really hard time with the systems that have been created for us. And I think school is one of those systems. It doesn't do a great job at promoting self-actualization and helping people kind of understand themselves in a different way. But I know from my own experience that spending time outside on backpacking trips in nature really does that well, and does it more effectively and efficiently than almost anything I've ever seen. So, combining those two things to me has just a lot of power, and it speaks to me. And it's really wonderful to be able to do that.
What did you teach in high school?
I taught biology and psychology.
Oh, cool.
High school. Yeah. So
very cool.
Yeah.
I assume you were a pretty good student just from your like academic background, but was there a certain point where you realized that in order to sort of, I don't know, become more of a fully actualized human being or just to live a richer life, that you needed to have experiences outside of the classroom, or was that just like always inside of you from when, like, as long as you can remember?
I think I became a teacher because I wasn't satisfied with my school experience.
Okay.
It's like school's a dirty word for so many people, like, oh, I got to do homework. I have to learn and it just like, it doesn't, it's not, learning should be fun. Learning should be a joy, and school sometimes can take the joy out of it. And that's a shame. So I said, I can do this better. Like someone needs to do something about this. So that's why I got into teaching and youth work. But what I've found is that like removing the restrictions of school, testing and the grades and all the things that kind of keep people sorted into an economy, you get so much more out of an experience in the backcountry because you're removed from those elements, and you're removed from just like the things that kind of keep people I want to say pacified, or I don't know, but like staring at screens all day is not good for humans. And getting outside is good for humans. It reminds us we're a part of the natural world and the natural order. And I know for me and for a lot of other people during COVID especially, it was like, well, how do you get your head on straight? You go for a hike. You go walk outside, even if it's around the block. And that's really important. And it just doesn't happen as much as it should. And so I just love the idea that this nonprofit can provide that in a really profound way for youth who might not otherwise have the chance.
And when did you first get involved with with Big City Mountaineers?
Mm-hmm. So I first heard about BCM in the mid 2000s because I subscribed to Backpacker magazine, and I thought, wow, what a cool idea! Like filed it away. Thought, that's someone else's amazing idea. Go them. And this past, I guess, February of '01, position was posted that is the position I hold now, which is executive director. I didn't think I would get it, but I thought I'd had to try, and I applied cold, like everyone else might have, and worked my way through a pretty intense interview process, and was made an offer in May of '01, and started in June, and I feel very lucky to do that.
Yeah, totally. Was there anything surprising about the organization when you first joined? Like, did you feel like you had a pretty good sense of what they did?
Yeah, I think the surprising thing is that even though we're a national nonprofit and we work in 7 metropolitan regions across the country, we do that with 9 full-time staff. And a lot of people, when they learn that, they're like, I can't believe that you do so much with so little in terms of personnel. And sometimes I can't either. Like, we all wear multiple hats, and, we contract out instructors for our trips and stuff like that. But we really run lean. And I didn't know how lean it was until I got in and started like working on the inside. And had to figure out, like, how do you do a lot with a little?
Yeah, totally.
So,
Can you lay out kind of like the total footprint of Big City Mountaineers? Like, where do you guys operate? How many people do you kind of serve every year? And like, what are the sort of scope of experiences that you guys do?
yeah. So we're, like I said, in 7 metropolitan regions around the country. We're headquartered in Metro Denver, and that's where I'm sitting right now. We are in Seattle, Portland, Oregon, the SF Bay Area, Minneapolis, and Boston. And then we have a legacy program that runs from Miami. We don't do trips in Florida. We have the kids travel to one of our other regions. And actually right now, as we're speaking, there's a group from Miami out in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Awesome. And what kind of trips are you taking kids on? And like, what are, who are the kids basically?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So, the trips in every region except Minnesota is hiking and backpacking. So we start everyone off with a day hike, and that is to kind of get them used to carrying a backpack and walking on trail, and just getting them more comfortable in natural environments. Maybe there's sounds that are new to them and things like that. From there, we move to a car camping front country overnight, and that is kind of, you can see there's a succession or a progression here. We call it a scaffolded approach internally. That is, it's to help them get comfortable with some technical skills, setting up tents, cooking over the stove, sleeping outside, like not going inside when the sun goes down. That is a new experience for a lot of the youth on our trips. And then it culminates in a week-long expedition. And this is a backcountry trip, self-supported backpacking. And I think the cool thing is that BCM provides everything that the group needs. We provide all the gear. We provide the van, the transportation, the food, the permits. We hire a professional instructor. And we really want to just eliminate as many barriers as possible to participation, so people can fully engage and not have to worry about not having the right rain jacket or sleeping bag or anything like that. So, yeah.
That's a pretty big jump to go from a day trip, an overnight, and then to go backpacking for a week.
It can be, yeah. Before that, we just did the backpacking trip without any of the preliminaries. And, we realized that, at least for me, my first, outdoor experience was not a week-long trip.
Yeah,
I worked my way up to that. And so, people should probably do that if they haven't ever done it before. And we rolled out this scaffolded approach nationwide this summer, and we're collecting data on it now. And it looks like it's the right thing to do. It really helps people engage with the experience a lot better. So
how many kids do like a full week long backpacking trip each year?
yeah, we're looking right this year. We're getting back to pre-COVID levels of participation. We're looking at around 300 youth that are going to be participating. And one of the cool things about our program too is that we maintain a very high ratio of adults to youth. So we have not just the instructor, but we have volunteers that go out on all of our trips, and we have staff from the youth agencies that we partner with as well. So, the 500-600 range total people, 300 plus youth for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a lot. That's a lot to organize for sure. So when you're going on these backpacking trips or doing these sort of engagement programs, what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, like with the kids that are participating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. There's two layers of answer to that. The first is this is something the program team came up with, and it's more qualitative. What we really are concerned with is 4 pillars and its connection to 4 different things. So number 1 is connection to self. I think it's important to understand and get to know yourself on a different level. And a backpacking experience gives you the opportunity to do that. 2 is a connection to community. And this is recognizing that when you go out on a trip with folks, you get to know them a lot differently and a lot better. And I think that's really important. 3 is a connection to nature. A lot of the youth that are on our trips live in urban environments and don't have access to just expanses of the natural world where you would look around and not see anything built by a human. So understanding your connection to that is important. And then 4 is a connection to joy. And that doesn't necessarily mean like exuberance or happiness all the time, although it can. It means, I think, making meaning or deriving understanding or feeling a sense of peace, which is something that nature gives us too. So I think those are, qualitatively what we're hoping happens. Quantitatively, we're looking at something new this year. And this is with an eye towards, it's not about the trip, it's about the self-actualization. And if we can use a backpacking trip to promote that in a really effective, efficient way, amazing, right? This is a high dosage intervention that can really change the landscape in terms of just social emotional growth and mental health and physical health and things like that. So what we're looking at right now are mental health, physical health, and social emotional capacity. And if we were to break that down, what we're seeing is, and this is specifically what we're measuring, increases in self-esteem, in self-efficacy, in empathy, and in sense of social belonging. And we picked those 4 dimensions because, number 1, we believe a trip will promote them. Like a BCM experience will give people space to like have those grow. And 2, they correlate really highly with other things out there in the world that are important, like academic success, career success, ability to really like live a life of your own choosing in a nutshell. So, the hope here is that, it's not about the backpack really. Yeah. It's about giving young people an experience that promotes these things that will help them long after the trip is over.
Yeah. How do you start to measure those things quantitatively?
Yeah. There is some very good psychological inventories or surveys that are used and have been used for years and years and years. And each of them has its own survey. We give a pre and a post, and we're actually going to give a 3 months post to see if there's like an enduring effect to what happened. And it's just rate on 1 to 5 if you agree with the statement kind of thing. In psychology, they call those Likert scales. So it takes under 10 minutes to do. And kids are usually like, well, why do I have to do this? This isn't school. But we explain, what our hopes are. We're very transparent about this. We want there to be an outcome from this experience, and we want to measure and see if like it's doing what we hope it does. And they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And they fill the thing out. And,
Would you ever, are you guys thinking about expanding beyond backpacking into other outdoor sports like rock climbing or anything else?
Yeah, good question. So, we in all of our regions except one, we do hiking and backpacking. In Minnesota, we do canoe trips, paddling in the Boundary Waters. So we do have a differentiation there. Rock climbing, we've dabbled with. So we've done like days at the gym and things like that. But what we're trying to figure out is like, where does that lead up to, right? We want there to be like a progression. And while you can have a really powerful day at a crag, like in a month when we do a week-long immersive thing, what does that look like for rock climbing?
Yeah,
and
take them
chances
on
are
big,
it looks
big trad multi-pitch and just traumatize them for life.
Yeah, I don't know if that's in the cards. So, last thing we don't want to do is traumatize people around nature. We want to make sure they like it. So there's that. And then there's really kind of, technical reasons around insurance and,
Sure.
it just costs more to like insure a trip like that. And there's gear and there's training for people who lead the trips that need to be in place. So, it's more expensive to do something like that too, which is the lame answer, but the real answer when you're trying to run an organization.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think the future looks like? Are there plans to grow the organization in terms of like headcount or regions or anything like that? Or where do you see it going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to sacrifice quantity for quality for quantity.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we still are doing the thing that we intend to do at a really high level before we think about scaling it. But that said, there is like, it's inarguable to me that like more young people or more people should have an experience like a BCM trip. Like the more, the better. Mm-hmm. And currently I think there's, more kind of evidence or more reason to stay where we're at and go deeper than to open up new regions and new cities. And just from a scaling overhead, like financial perspective, it makes more sense to do that. So that's probably our next move. I actually need to be writing a 3-year strategic plan this fall. So this is a good prompt for me to start figuring that stuff out. Thank you. But that said, like I'll get a call, and I usually get a couple calls every quarter saying, hey, have you ever thought about coming to Atlanta? Or have you ever thought about coming to New Jersey or, Indianapolis or something like that? And I said, I usually say, yeah, I've thought about it. And if you can help me find $250,000 for the next 3 years, we could really seriously talk about that.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to that sort of expansion, but I think we just need kind of a financial guarantee that we can pull it off first.
Yeah. If you zoom out a little bit, what do you think is sort of like the state of young people being exposed to nature in a meaningful way? I have no sense of like, do most kids in this country get to have some sort of wilderness experience? Is that something that you guys are tracking on just like a sort of a national level?
Mm-hmm. I haven't looked at the data. Anecdotally, kids are spending less time outside now than they ever have in the history of human beings.
Yeah.
There's more reasons to be inside. There's more screens to look at. The weather is harsher, like climate change is affecting that too. There's, smoke advisories in many places and heat and all sorts of craziness. But I would say, like I said, anecdotally, it's less common for kids to be outside than it used to be. And even from my childhood, I mean, I would come home from school and just be in my yard in my neighborhood riding my bike around, and you just don't see that as much.
Yeah.
And this was, right before Nintendo and right before Atari and personal computers and stuff. But now it's so easy just to be attached to your phone and on Snapchat or who knows what else. Yeah. And it's depriving people of an experience, I think.
Yeah. do you worry about, obviously things don't happen in these extremes, but do you worry about a generation growing up with like no connection to nature and kind of just like living on TikTok and Snapchat and whatever else comes after those things?
I do. I do worry about that. I think nature can be defined a lot of ways, and you don't need to be out in Yellowstone to experience nature. Even if you live in an urban environment, there is nature around you. There's birds and there's insects and there's plants and there's ways to kind of have a touch point with that. But, just even for myself, like leaving my phone at home when I take my 1-year-old daughter in the stroller around the block makes a difference.
Yeah.
And it's harder and harder to do that. And I'm sucked in too. I'm like, well, if I bring my phone, I can listen to the baseball game while I walk. Cool. But like, no, sometimes we have to just respect the fact that like we have evolved, our minds have evolved to be attentive to things in nature, in a way that we can distract ourselves from so easily these days. And our culture has kind of overtaken our biology, in terms, it just outpaced it. And it's so easy for us to just glue ourselves to a screen, to our Twitter feed, to whatever. But we lose something really essential when we do that a lot of the time.
How do you think we solve that, like at scale? Is it because obviously there's a lot of families out there that put, that take the family camping and stuff like that. But do you think that it ultimately falls down to like the school system? Is it the nonprofit sector? Are there going to be 100 more organizations like yours that are kind of attacking different aspects of this? Or how do you think we address this, nationally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't pretend to be a policy person. I can't think that expansively all the time, but I would say, just from an initial kind of spitballing, like, guess, that it has to do with school, and instituting some sort of outdoor ed into a school curriculum. And there's examples of this in Jefferson County in Colorado. Every single, I think, fifth grader goes to Outdoor Lab, which is a week-long experience out at a camp. And everyone in the county does it, without fail. And there's people who have their kids do it and their kids' kids do it. And it's really cool. So, there are ways to do that. So that's part of it. I think out of school programming is important as well. And that all, to me, is a push, like is a force. What I would love to see happen is some sort of consciousness around the benefits of spending time outdoors, and like a free will choice being made to say, okay, this afternoon I leave the phone at home and we're going to go to the park and picnic, and take like a technology break.
Totally. So it's not just using the outdoors as a way to combat these other forces of TikTok and screen time, but it's recognizing like, hey, we're making a choice to do this because it's really good for us. And it's about like the betterment of people as opposed to just, avoiding these negative things.
Exactly. And, these things that you mentioned aren't inherently negative. Yeah. They're tools. They're like a pen. You can write beautiful poetry with a pen, or you can write a hate letter with a pen. And technology itself isn't bad, I don't think. And it's here to stay. No one's going to turn their phone in permanently. But it does kind of preclude other things that I think are valuable.
Yeah.
And
I would push back a little bit.
We realize that
I think that pens are a little bit more agnostic, right? Like social media companies have huge teams of really, really smart people trying to figure out how do we get people to increase their usage, and how do we make products stickier and more addictive. And so I definitely agree with you that they're not like inherently bad, but they seem to lead to patterns of use that are having really negative externalities, like a lot more often than pens are. So I'm with you, but at the same time, I mean, I try not to use social media as much as possible. I'm still a little bit addicted to Reddit and Twitter, but I just don't think it's fair to have especially young people like having to like battle with these giant corporations with, huge teams of people trying to figure out how to trigger dopamine responses.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially when the motivation is to drive shareholder value, right? And to sell more advertisements, and that it bifurcates society as a byproduct is awful, and it makes our politics impossible, and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But you can also use it for good. I mean, like I've had back when I was on Facebook, like encounters with people that I lost touch with. I was like, oh wow, you still are out there doing cool stuff. It's great to hear from you. So there is the potential for good with any of these tools, and they're not going to go away, for better or worse. So the question becomes like, how do we carve out room for other things and put it kind of in a place where it's used appropriately and not abused and not kind of out of habit of addiction or something like that. And I think the outdoors and nature has part of that answer. And we see this on trips. I mean, I went on a trip earlier this summer with some kids, and at the end they were like, wow, I'm really surprised that like I didn't want my phone back as much as I thought I would on day one. And I don't mind staying out another night or two. It's cool.
Yeah.
Like this is different. And now that I'm used to it, like I see value here. And like that to me was amazing.
Do you have any advice or thoughts for parents who like maybe want to bring their kids camping, or maybe they're not very experienced, but they like kind of agree with you, but they don't know where to start? Because a lot of times, people either don't have access to or don't have access to opportunities, or kids aren't going to be the ones like pushing for it.
Yeah. I would say that like you don't need the fancy gear to be outside. And if people are like, oh man, I have to go spend thousands of dollars to like get the right tent and shoes and pants, like you don't, right? Like human beings have been living outside for years and years and years before any of that existed. And the fact that we cover ourselves in plastic and pretend to be outdoorsy is kind of funny to me. But like it doesn't have to be this like 2-week long excursion. You can spend an afternoon going to a local park and sitting under a tree, and you can get a lot out of that. You can walk around the block, even if there isn't a park, and get something out of that, and in doing so, I hope people understand that like all of the barriers and kind of social norming around like who is outdoorsy and who isn't is just like made up.
Totally.
And people will think, oh, people that look like me are people that go to these places and do these things. And unfortunately, by and large, that has been true, but it doesn't have to be. And I hope through BCM, like we encourage a generation of young people to realize the outdoors is for me too, even if I don't look like the person in the ad. And even if I don't have the right Gore-Tex or, whatever. It's the most natural thing in the world to be outside. It's how we evolved. It's, like we are a part of nature. And I think just doing it at whatever level makes sense or is accessible is a win.
Yeah, totally. I want to wrap up with a couple like rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So take as much time as you want. They don't have to be super rapid fire. Okay. What's your favorite place to go hiking in Colorado?
In Colorado, the San Juans.
Nice. Good answer.
Yeah.
What's do you have any funny stories of trips that you've been on with BCM or similar?
Oh, every trip has a funny story. This past trip I was on with BCM and a group of kids, I had left to go to the bathroom, and I came back and they all started singing happy birthday to me. And it was not my birthday. Like it was 5 months away from my birthday. They didn't know that, but they just wanted to see what I would do, I guess. But I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's cool. What are you looking forward to most for the rest of the year? Any trips coming up?
So BCM's at the end of our season right now. We'll run trips through about Labor Day, and then we'll spend the cooler months kind of taking stock, reviewing some data that came back, and planning. For me personally, I may get to squeeze a trip in October. And I have to just convince my friends to take the time off to do it with me, but we'll see.
If people want to find you online or learn more about BCM, either to like volunteer or donate or just learn more about what you guys are doing, can you point them in the right direction?
Totally. Our website is, excuse me. Our website is bigcitymountaineers.org. And there you can find out information on how to make a donation. There are opportunities to volunteer, which are very popular. So we can't guarantee that anyone is going to definitely get to go on a trip with students, but you can sign up to volunteer there. And we have a really cool program that we're calling Adventure for Someone. And what that is if you have an idea for an outdoor activity that you've always wanted to do or that you maybe do normally, we can help you overlay a fundraising component on that. So the outdoor activity that you choose can then support other people through BCM to have a similar experience. And we think that that's really meaningful. It's helped people kind of get over the finish line in terms of like deciding, okay, I am going to go hike this long trail, or I am going to do this bike ride. But it doesn't have to be like a big extreme thing. You know, you can choose any activity that feels good to you. So it's really inclusive. It's a great way to support, and it's a great way to like practice what we preach, which is get outside and enjoy nature. So check it out on bigcitymountaineers.org.
Awesome. David, thank you so much. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. I really appreciate what you're doing. And, we love Big City Mountaineers at Red Point also. So I'm sure we'll talk to you guys soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was great to talk
Thanks.
today.
See ya. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Top Out. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next episode, please follow our page on LinkedIn or subscribe to our YouTube. We'll see you next time.